What's up, people of the internet? And here we are again with another review video of some plate carrier stuff. Alright, so this is kind of a little bit of like a bonus round in the series of plate carrier reviews I've been doing. What we're going to talk about today is the Krydex ripoff of the Gen 2-ish Slickster, and we'll also touch on real quick some of the other accessories that I got with it. So I got this carrier back when, well, maybe it still is on sale, but anyways, it was usually $130 for this like little package that Krydex sells of the Slickster, the Spiritus Microfight ripoff, and the Spiritus Sack ripoff. I also got the little Faro micro admin pouch ripoff as well, because it's something I've been wanting to try but didn't want to pay for the one that Faro makes. So, yeah. So, long story short, with all this stuff, is basically this is like it's gear for poor people. Not like I would know anything about that, but this is my overall impression of it is sort of a case of everybody knows that like USGI surplus is pretty OP if you're on a budget, but if you want something that is a little bit more of a current design as well as a little bit less heavy, there aren't a whole lot of options out there on the market for I guess you could say budget gear that is something decent but considerably cheaper than what the real thing would cost. That's kind of my overall impression of Krydex stuff based on what's on their website, as well as the things I got to have in hand to look over. It's gear for either people who are on a serious budget, or people who want to just like try stuff out before spending money on the real thing. So that's pretty much the long and short of what I'm seeing from this company. We'll get into more detail with this stuff right now. Let me just get this out of the way. And we'll start with the actual plate carrier itself, since this is a plate carrier review. Alright, so what this basically is an overseas ripoff of the older Gen 2 Faro Slickster. It's pretty much the same thing as any other standard Slickster. A front plate bag, a rear plate bag without the rear flap, again, because Krydex, like most overseas companies, is really good at copycatting things, but not so good at making small little changes and improvements where need be, because they don't actually create anything, they just, copy everyone else. But anyways, that aside, so it comes with a standard elastic cummerbund, that all Slicksters come with. It's you're gonna hear me repeat this over and over again throughout looking at this stuff, but it's kind of like, I'd say like 80% just as good as the name brand stuff, which is shocking to me because I haven't. My experience with overseas clones of things goes back quite a number of years, and back then, let's just say that the overseas stuff that was cloning, something like the London Bridge stuff and Eagle stuff and similar stuff like that, it was really bad. Bad in like a poorly sewn to the point where you could almost pull it apart with your bare hands. Needless to say, in the battle days, overseas gear very much got a deserved reputation for being crap, because it was. And I think that's starting to change a little bit. And this is, I think, a good overview use case of how much it's changed in the last 10 years or so. It's still not quite, at the level of the for real brands, but I would say it's a solid 70%, maybe even 85 in some cases of the overall functionality and sewing quality that the real thing would be for literally a fraction, pennies on the dollar. So anyways, case in point, to start with the cummerbund, it is double stitched on the back here where it attaches to the elastic, and then single stitched in a box stitch everywhere else. I haven't gotten my hands on one of the current gen Slickster cummerbund, so I don't know if the Slickster from Faro has an actual stiffened piece here, but the piece that is included with the Krydex version here is just a piece of laminate. It's nothing special. Alright, it's 4 cells per side. The webbing at the bottom is bar tacked in place, and it's actually seems to be a pretty solid bar tack. I've seen a lot of bar tacks from cheaper gear where sometimes it doesn't go all the way through the piece of material. It'll go through one side and then grab onto the very top threads or top fibers of the material on the other side, or the webbing on the other side, but not actually go through it and hold it tight. So, in that case, then you have a situation where you could essentially, just pull it apart because the threads aren't fully stuck through both pieces of material. But in this case, they actually are, and it's a pretty nice, tight, seems like a pretty solid bar tack. And then, unfortunately, the center sewing here is back to single stitching. That's kind of lame. I for the amount of stretching and strain that's going to be on these, this is a part where you would definitely want that to be at least double stitched. Now, this is another thing you're gonna hear me say a lot with this. If you had your own sewing machine and were willing to put a little bit of time into this, this is a pretty easy fix. It's just a straight stitch, so pretty much any sewing machine can do that. Get yourself some proper mil-spec bonded thread and go for it. You could lock this down pretty easily without a whole lot of effort. I guess part of my thing with this is like, it's potentially a case of, if you don't mind putting the work in to kind of, beef up some of the areas that should be beefed up, then you can look at the overall price point and be like, well, is it cheap enough to me, for me to justify putting the extra work in to fix the problems that otherwise should be fixed from the factory. But anyways, other than that, the Velcro it seems like real Velcro, not the weird rip-off stuff that you see sometimes. The elastic seems to be either proper mil-spec elastic or a really good clone of it. It's nice and stiff and thick and very nice and very hard to pull on. It's not like the some of the underwear elastic type cummerbunds and inserts and stuff that I've seen from other overseas gear, where it's just super thin and just boing every time you try to pull it. It has almost no retention to stiffness at all, in which case you can just pull it and pull it and pull it and never actually get the plate carrier tight around your body. Whereas this looks to be just as good as any other USA made elastic cummerbund I've seen on any other carrier, except for the single stitching. So that's you know, again, that kind of the 80% of it's pretty good, but almost not quite. All right. You have the main body here. Go ahead and start with the front. All right, it's basically just like a regular Slickster, right down to the construction. As usual, the thing is made of multiple pieces of material. Again, if the company was going to clone this thing, I kind of wish they would have taken a little initiative to fix some of the less good features that the original item has. But other than that, I mean, it is a clone. That's what overseas manufacturers are good at, is cloning things in a one-to-one way, and this is definitely a one-to-one clone. So yeah, it's in, you know, individual pieces, just like the regular Slickster. I do very much like that they went back to this 2x4 Velcro laser cut interface here. I also do like the fact that they, instead of using laser cut for the Swift clip buckles, they went back to webbing, and it is, again, bar tacked on here surprisingly well. As I said before, I think everybody should be using this sort of Velcro and laser cut or webbing interface for the front here, because it's 2023 and people need that these days. It's definitely way the hell more useful than just a piece of Velcro. So that's nice. I can't for the life of me remember if the original Gen 2 Slickster had that, but this clone of it does. Unfortunately, I sold my Gen 2 Slickster a couple years back, so I don't have it to compare with this directly, which is a shame, but because there were some features on the Gen 2 that I felt were a little better than the current Gen 1, namely, you know, the two-piece shoulder straps, and I think even on the original Slickster there was some slight differences in sewing and so forth. So there is that, but unfortunately I don't have the thing anymore to give a direct comparison to, which is a shame. Anyways, your standard full-size piece of Velcro here that is, of course, properly sized for either a placard or a 5-inch cummerbund, depending on what you want to do with this carrier. The bottom flap for the plate is pretty much the same as it is now on the current gen Slickster. It's a, you know, an angled flap with a 1.5 inch, I think, piece of Velcro at the bottom, and then on the inside of the carrier there is like a 3-inch or so piece of Velcro on the inside here for the flap to interface with, which is nice. Like I mentioned in a previous review, I always prefer the manufacturers to oversize that piece of internal loop Velcro so that you have enough flexibility to deal with different thickness plates. That's always a much better and more desirable feature than just a simple, you know, single 2-inch piece at the bottom of the plate bag. On the back end, we have our standard, I guess it would be 1/4 inch or whatever thickness this is of 3D mesh, and it is just like the current and previous Slicksters, a single piece of mesh without any corduroy backing. So it's mesh. It does still have the stretchy, you know, anti-stretch strap sewed into the inside, so that's good. At least I didn't forget that. And then at the top here, the shoulder straps are bar tacked again into the material, and once again the bar tacking is actually pretty good. I can't see anything, you know, like wrong with it. It's tight. It goes all the way through the material. It's not like, you know, half grabbing one side of the material over the other. Yeah, I'm gonna say it's actually surprisingly for an overseas clone a step up from the current version of it. The front shoulder straps are a single piece of laminate with loop Velcro on it. This is where you can start to see some of the less awesome stitching. It might be hard to see on camera, but the stitching on here, especially towards the top here, is a little bit loose. And I don't mean just, spaced a little bit further than the classic, 8-to-1 for a solid piece of gear, but it's like machine loose. In that you can see, especially towards the end here, if you turn it, you're probably not going to see that on camera, but you can see that it hasn't pulled the thread tight all the way through, and it's actually a loose run at the bottom here, and also kind of down the corners of the sides. It's pretty much the same for both sides of shoulder straps. Ironically, the sewing down the side is, a little bit, a little more spaced out. I'd have to actually get a tape measure and measure it. I forgot to do that, but it looks to me like it's probably a 5-to-1 stitch instead of the 8-to-1 stitch pattern that it should be. And then it's kind of a little bit loose, and again at the at the front end of it, you can see that there is a run of extremely loose stitching that it wasn't pulled tight when the machine sewed it. Let me see if I can get something to demonstrate that real quick. Yeah, let's use this pencil with pretty colors. Let's see. It's kind of hard to tell if this was a sharper pencil, but you can kind of start to see the way the thread is bending there. If I had a sharper pencil, you would be able to tuck it under there and pull up on each of these thread portions. Each of these stitches here, you'd be able to stick a sharp pencil in there and pull under and pull it up. So, yeah, it's, already getting to a point where, like I said before, it's kind of like half in the bag. Like, there's some areas on here where it's like, hey, this is actually really good for an overseas carrier, and then there's other areas where you're kind of like, and here we go. We're starting to see the quality level that I expected. So that's pretty much the long and short of the front plate. The back plate is also nothing really different to write home about. Your standard Slickster back plate with top and bottom Velcro. It's the same as any other Slickster we're all familiar with. The straps are again bar tacked at the top. The sewing on the straps for the rear plate bag is slightly better, even though it's still a wider stitch pattern than it should be, but it's only, it still is kind of loose towards the top, and then you can see where it kind of starts to get a little bit wild here and almost veers off of the strap itself before coming back around. Same thing with this side, it kind of veers towards the edge of the strap and then comes back in. So, it's also at the bottom, you can see the starter or starting finishing portion on both sides. It's it's there. Kind of like I was talking about with other carriers, it's a little bit short of a stitch and also a bit loose. I think, given that this is not a high stress area, it will more or less hold. Considering you're gonna probably set your straps once and forget it, the whole thing is not that critical of a problem. There's other areas that are not exactly well sewn on the carrier and some of the other side items that are more concerning than the shoulder straps, but again, this brings me back to kind of my point about pointing this out, and that is if they can't get their shit together on a simple area like this, well, you know how it goes elsewhere. As far as the rest of the carrier, it's pretty much exactly the same as the front, outside of the design. It's the same size bottom flap, same piece of Velcro, both on the flap as well as internally. Same mesh with including the non-stretch little piece of ribbon strap in here, and as both on the front and rear, it is actually bar tacked in place at the bottom onto the Velcro. So that's pretty much the long and short of it with this. That's pretty much all I got to say about the rear bag. The buckles on the front. In fact, with all the gear I've got here from Krydex, the buckles are clearly not the actual legitimate like ITW or similar properly spec'd buckles. There's some sort of cheaper plastic. There's some sort of texture to it. It's a strange texture, almost like it feels almost 3D printed, but it's not. But anyways, there's clearly a much cheaper build to the buckles on all the parts of equipment that I got from Krydex. As far as the interior of the bag goes, I'll just run through the front real quick because the back is essentially exactly the same as the front from a quality level, but there's actually less stuff sewn on the back, so there's no point in me really going over it. Alright. Play elevator music while I turn this plate carrier inside out. Wait, that's not it. Alright, now that we've come back from that short little interlude, so as I was saying before, a lot of the stuff with this Krydex stuff is, in fact, I'll say most of it is single stitched, and the plate bags here are no exception. Around the edges of the plate bag, as well as for all the pieces, individual pieces of Velcro and Krydex that are, sewn together to make a Slickster, everything is single stitched. Even more so, this goes into what I was talking about with some of the other carriers, like the Bees carrier, where I was talking about the threads not only being loose where they're tucked in and started or finished, but some areas where they are kind of not tight and will likely potentially pull out over time. This actually isn't as bad as I thought it would be, but there are some key areas where there are some less good places, like, for example, here, as well as here. The area where it's tucked in is very short and kind of loose, especially on this bottom one here. If I were to take and grab this thread and pull at it, well, I'm not going to do it because I want to shred this carrier, but I could pull it, and once it's pulled out, the whole thing is going to start to unravel. Same thing down here. This is a very short tuck and a bit loose with threads hanging out. Now, again, same as with like the Bees carrier, your mileage may vary given that this is all kind of on the inside, but I feel it's worth mentioning because it being on the inside is irrelevant to the fact that this is the structure that's holding all the pieces of the carrier together. So the fact that the stuff isn't super, well stitched and nice and tight where it should be definitely is worth noting as a point of concern. Then when you get to the bottom, of course, it is the edge sewing is ended at the bottom, and there's just a big, overrun of like a nest of thread here at the bottom that does seem, I'm not sure whether it is genuinely tightly sewn or whether there's just enough thread piled on top of itself here to make it tight. And then if you go on to the left side here, there's a bit less. It's a much smaller area that is oversewn here at the bottom, and it's not quite as piled up as the right side over here. So, given that this is at, the bottom of the carrier, we're going to be stretching this thing open to get your plates in there. Will it make it, once or twice? Yeah, sure, it'll make it once or twice. If you're going to be doing this over and over again, taking, plates in and out of it, I'd be concerned about it. I'm, like I said, still concerned about it. Enough worth mentioning because it's part of the actual structure of the carrier. So anyways, that's pretty much the long and short of it. It's it's sewn partially about what I expected and partially better. It's it's interesting to see where things differ from legitimate items versus some of the overseas stuff. All right, so plate carriers aside. Let's talk for a minute about the accessories that came with this. So, both of these items, the SAC ripoff and the Mark III, I think it is, ripoff, both came packaged with the Slickster carrier as a whole thing. Ironically, they they gave you the side buckles for the micro rig here, but they didn't actually include shoulder straps. So that's kind of a bummer. However, they did include a bunch of other stuff with it. They included, I'm a YouTube pro. They included a organizational / shotgun little card, 308 insert for the inside of the Spiritus thing, and a second 5.56 insert, as well as a lid, little half flap. So I thought that was, kind of nice of them to include some of this extra stuff in there, although I thought it was amusing that they include all this extra stuff, but no shoulder straps. Yeah, go figure. The accessories are actually, I would say, pretty well sewn, considering they could have skimped on these more than they did. It's single stitched around the edges, single stitched down the middle, but the in between of the little elastics here for the shotgun shells or batteries or whatever is actually really well either double or triple stitched. And it's in there, put this stuff down, it's in there nice and tight with no loose threads, no overruns. They did a really good job on that, which is hilarious that they would go so overboard on the threading for an insert like this and then skimp on the cummerbund and just like one stitch it down the middle of the cummerbund, which is going to see a lot more use. I guess that's just the way that this overseas stuff works. What they pick to reinforce and what they skimp on, who knows why they pick it. The little half flap here, again, it's okay. It's double stitched at the bottom. and then double stitched for the Velcro on the sides of the Velcro for the front of it, and then I believe on the side and bottom for the interior. It's actually okay. Again, the stitching is... Oh, I take that back. The front flap is actually double stitched on the top too. It just doesn't go through both pieces of Cordura. It's only sewn to the top piece. The stitching on both this and the little insert there are both actually pretty good. It's not loose, it's tight. There's no machine loose areas where it didn't, pull the threading tight all the way through. So ironically, the little accessories that they included with it are kind of doing a little bit better than the main body of the carrier itself. Alright, so as far as the inserts, both of the 556 inserts are the same. Just a 3 insert. It's only got Velcro at the top instead of a full piece along the sides, but I mean, it holds it in well enough. It doesn't really need the full piece of Velcro, although I personally prefer that, but well, I gotta cut corners somewhere, I guess. The edges are taped, and I believe, yeah, ironically, again, on the inserts, they're double stitched, and actually double stitched pretty well. It's nice and tight. It's easily just as good as any other insert I've seen, and yet for some reason, yet again, they wouldn't double stitch the cummerbund for the plate carrier itself. I don't get it, but okay. Yeah, I believe the 308 insert is also double stitch as well. Yeah, I mean, the the inserts are all fine. There's nothing really to write home about there. They're on par with anything else you could buy. The actual chassis itself is it's okay. Everything, once again, is back to being single-stitched, just like the carrier, with the exception of the upper corners on both parts of the placard pockets, which are bar-tacked at the top corners here. I thought that was good of them to keep doing that, and as with the other bar tacking on here, it's pretty good. Nothing really wrong with it. I won't go over this entire placard because this video is already going to be long enough as it is, but suffice it to say, the single stitching on this placard is about the same as the single stitching everywhere else on the plate carrier. It varies between good enough to, wow, that is a little bit loose and sloppy, because I guess that's just the way this goes. It is sort of double stitched on the sides, and there's some kind of, I guess I'll call it a stitch and a half at the bottom. It's sort of double stitched, but I think it's just a product of sewing multiple pieces of the placard on top of each other. I don't think it was actually intentional for it to be double stitched. Everything here is single stitched. It's just that it's all sewn together in this spot. So double stitched by theoretical default, I guess you could say so. There is one area here where I'm not sure what happened with the Velcro. I guess they went a little too tight here, and it kind of split a piece of it, and now it's poking up here, and it's just barely being held on by the threading. So once that threading pops off from you pulling this on and off your plate carrier, which you're going to be doing, this is eventually going to pop out, and I highly suspect over time it's going to crack. It's going to crack and pull out along the entire bottom stitch here, which sucks. But I mean, this thing is also, I think, if you buy the actual standalone chest rig with the straps and side wings and everything on there, website, I think it's like 60 something bucks for the whole package, so mistakes are going to be made. Other than that, there's no actual defects anywhere else here aside from the kind of wishy-washy tightness to the sewing. The other area that I think is worth mentioning is I find it ironic that they bar tacked the shoulder straps for the plate carrier, they bar tacked the corners here, and as well as some areas on the placard, but the buckle webbing that is going to actually hold this thing onto the plate carrier is it is neither double stitched nor is it bar tacked. It's just single stitched in here along with the Velcro on the inside of it. So that's also a little bit lame. And once again, these buckles are some sort of weird ass textured chintzy plastic, not a proper ITW buckle or even a good clone of an ITW buckle. They're just sort of just sort of okay. The fit of the elastic insert in here is very tight, but that's actually a good thing because it, means you don't have any lame, extra spacing on the sides. That leads to this being kind of floppy. And then, of course, the elastic inserts work like elastic inserts. They're totally fine. This elastic insert is sewn the same as the other ones, which is okay. And then, of course, the front is the usual loop lining. And it's all, again, a little bit different. Hold on one second. Let me double check this. Yeah, so I believe so given that the way that this is all sewn together, it looks like they sewed, either they sewed these both on here at the same time, or they sewed one and then sewed the other one on. So it is technically double stitched along the sides of the Velcro on all areas of it. And then, of course, the top, bottom, and box stitch is all single stitched, like everything else here is. So that's pretty much the long and short of this. There is a area down here where there is a run of the stitching either tucking into itself or a second line of stitching being started on top of the first line. I can't quite tell. But how well that's going to fare with this being, abraded against something on the ground or something like that is a small area of concern, but overall not a huge deal. And everything is, it is, both the plate carrier and all the accessories and the pouches and stuff, it's all single stitch, but it is also sewn and cut and sized very precisely. There's no like crooked, like this isn't like half, pushed down this way, that's not the other way, the Velcro's all in, everything's straight and ordered up like it should be. Unless you looked at the stitching and, some of the quality of the hardware, you wouldn't be able to tell, just looking at it, a difference between the clone here and the real thing. Alright, so, cool. We'll go quickly over, oh god, 30-round magazines. And there goes my YouTube channel. Really? Alright, anyways, going over these last two little pouches real quick. This is a little clone of one of the Pharaoh admin pouches, and this is a clone / direct blatant fucking copy of a Spirit of Systems Mark whatever the fuck sack. We'll do this one real quick since it's the smallest and easiest. It's a pouch. It's a small little GP pouch. It's as usual, like half of everything is double stitched, half of everything is single stitched. Ironically, for this sample of one, little pouch, it's okay. There's none of the stitching on here that I've seen throughout the whole thing is really like loose or not pulled tight, like the issues with some of the shoulder strap areas or the internals of the plate carrier, etc., etc. And then once again, the interior here with the elastic is double stitched down, and it is okay elastic. It's kind of right in between the nice stiff mil-spec stuff and the underwear elastic that we so know and love from overseas products. It's kind of like right in between that. I'm actually kind of okay with that for the interior of a pouch like this, given that I want to be able to get things in and out of it, easily, and having a little bit more stretch is a little bit more conducive to that, or at least so I've found. And then, of course, in the back here, there's a little slot pocket for like a notebook or something. Overall, it's fine. It's good to go. It's light duty, but everything is sewn right. This is only single stitched in, so beware if you're trying to fit something large in these slots other than maybe a pen or a marker. This is only single stitched. Well, it's kind of like that 1.5, like the other plate carriers have. Other than that, it's totally fine. As far as the sack clone here, it's got some kind of, actually I should mention that about this. The top of this pouch has some kind of stretchy material, tweevish stuff. I'm not entirely sure this is real tweave. It seems a little bit on the thin side, so I genuinely question what the longevity of this is going to be. But in case you're wondering how close this is to the actual thing, it does have the stretchy shit on top. On the front of the Spiritus sack clone, it also has that same tweevish stuff. Again, kind of a little thin. I can't remember. Again, I sold my Mark 1 sack years back, so I don't have it to compare it with. I want to say the regular tweave is a little thicker than this. This does feel a bit thin, but I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I've had anything with, a tweave portion on it. But other than that, this too is kind of okay, kind of eh. It's, it's not like, off kilter or anything. It has all the same features in the same spots. The Velcro for the portion that actually attaches it to your rig is okay. It is, let me double check this. I think it's just single stitched all around. I don't see any obvious double stitching anywhere. It's single stitch all around, but unlike some other things, the single stitching here is actually done totally fine. It's nice and tight. It's still a little bit, looser than your standard 1 and 8, but it is tight, and it's, it's tight, it's straight, it's not, veering off onto the, like it's going to come off the side of it. The areas with the, to lock the thread in place, once it's finished, that's all good enough, it's all nice and tight. So, the part that is going to get the least amount of wear when you're using this is good to go. As far as the inside goes, it's got seam tape around all the seams. I've tried to pull it up and see if the Cordura itself is actually stitched together before the seam tape, before the seam tape is put on it, and I can't seem to see any difference. So I'm going to assume that, like the rest of everything here, it's all single stitched, and the seam tape is around here. Just it's all stitched together once. That's what I'm going to assume, considering I can't see another stitch underneath it anywhere. What you call it? The Velcro on the inside of the pouch is double stitched on the ends and then single stitch everywhere else, both front and back. The zippers honestly would probably be the area that worry me the most, considering, you know, not only are they single stitched in, but given that the overall threading on everything here is a little bit loose, I'd suspect that the zippers may eventually become a problem if you're going to use this a lot. If you're going to be constantly in and out of it, maybe not so great. These zippers probably will pull out of this eventually, but outside of that, if you're gonna buy this thing specifically to use it as like a medical pouch, and you're gonna put all your shit in it, attach it to your chest rig or plate carrier, and never touch it again until you need it, it's fine. Like it functions. It's built, you know, correctly to the size and specifications that the standard sack is built to. You know, like, that kind of goes with everything here. Like, outside of it actually being heavily used, it's kind of okay. So yeah, that's pretty much the long and short of it. I will say, in closing, with all this stuff, as I might have mentioned at the beginning of this long-ass video, if you've actually stuck around this long, congratulations, you have the patience of a freaking saint. All this gear is very much, how do I put this? Annoyingly good enough. I was expecting to come into this and be able to shit on it a little bit harder than I've been able to shit on it, and I kind of find that I can't. There are definitely some issues with sewing in places, but then in other places it's also totally okay, unless you're gonna, you know, like, I wouldn't recommend you deploying with this. And if you're gonna buy like your one set of gear for the end of the world, or, you know, shit hits the fan, like if this is gonna be like serious use stuff, I would still recommend going with the real thing. But outside of that, especially for the items that aren't gonna see, you know, if you're gonna use it in a way where it's not gonna see heavy use, like the sack clone. If you're just looking for like a medical dangler, I don't see any reason not to buy this thing for, what is it, $17 on the website instead of $70 or whatever they're up to now, $65. Direct from Spiritus. It's good enough, you know. It's good enough to be a medical pouch that's just needs to stay on your kit and hold your stuff in it until you know, need a hole patched. I don't really see a point, if you're gonna use it in a limited role, to dish out a ridiculous amount of money for something that's just going to hang there and never really be used. If this was something that you're going to use as more of a general purpose pouch, a storage pouch, if you were going to put like your nods in here, nah, get the real thing, just to make sure, because I can't find where the stitch is to actually hold this flap on. So I'm going off the assumption that it's in here with the stitching for the body of the pouch, which means it's probably single stitched in. Considering I can't get the without unstitching this completely, I can't get the seam tape off, and the stitching isn't offset like a lot of companies do this as. So I can only assume that this is single stitched like everything else is. So I can only assume that this flap that holds the thing on your kit is probably also single stitched. I guess you could go back on what I said about it being useful for a medical dangler and say, well, if it pulls off your kit, your medical supplies go flinging off into the void somewhere, never to be seen again. that could be a bad thing, obviously, but at the same time, for the unless you're going to be trying to stick like a a plate behind it in here with your medical supplies or some kind of like a an IV bag or something that's actually going to be heavy. An IFAC supplies that would fill this up weighs what, maybe a couple pounds. Um, so I'm gonna go ahead and tentatively stand by what I said is that this would be great for a medical pouch, maybe not so great for anything else. Um, as far as the rest of it goes, the single stitching on the actual body that holds the plate carrier together is very concerning. And definitely something that I would, if you were going to use this, I would definitely keep an eye on that. Or even better yet, if you have a sewing machine or know somebody with a sewing machine, buy them a case of beer and have them run an extra stitch or two around the edge of it. And if you did that, you're actually pretty much almost as good to go as the real thing. Obviously, the actual body portions are not going to be double stitched because you'd have to pretty much take the entire carrier apart to do that. However, it could be said that given that it's only single stitched around the edges and not really that tightly single stitched, you could theoretically pull it apart with minimal damage to the material, double stitch everything down the actual front of it, and then double stitch the plate bag back together. But this goes right back to what I said at the beginning is how much effort do you want to put in to fixing the issues that would already be fixed if you just bought the real thing. Some people, if you already have the sewing equipment, may find that at this ridiculously low price point, an extra, have them spending an hour or so to restitch everything themselves, both the body and like the shoulder strap areas that are really just poorly done. Going around it a couple times with your own machine for the ridiculously cheap price that this came in at, it might be worth it for you. You know, your mileage may vary. As it is now, if I was a end user and I had no ability to change anything, I would say this is very much like I said at the beginning. It's light duty stuff for either minimal use or to try it out and see if it's something that you're going to want before dishing out the money for the real thing. Because obviously some of these items here are way more expensive. And then with these three things plus cummerbund accessories was, like I said, if it's still on sale when this video goes up, it was $95 plus I think some shipping for all of this, minus this small pouch. So, I mean, gosh, like, you can't get a Slickster itself for that kind of money. As far as leaving it alone, I would say your best uses for this would be trying stuff out, using it for playing with, like airsoft. If you want to, get either, if you're like a kid who is on a small budget and you don't want to, dish out for the expensive stuff, or you just don't want to, you're a person who has the real stuff and you don't want to just destroy it playing, BB Wars in the bushes. Putting a hole in a, $50 or, $100 bunch of equipment here is a lot more tolerable than me puncturing or shredding or otherwise destroying, let's say a pouch that by itself costs $65, $70. I would also say this would be really good gear to get for people who are like firearms instructors. If you deal with people who are, they want to come to, perhaps you're putting on a more advanced class and they want to come to it, but they don't either have gear to come to the class or they don't know what gear to buy, your ability to throw in a couple sets of gear in your spare parts bin to have on hand for other people to try out at a class like that, this is perfect for that shit. It costs a very small amount of money. It's good enough for occasional use. And if the new idiot that you handed it to completely destroys it, you're out like what, like $17 for this and like $60 if you bought the whole, thing with the expander wings and harness and everything. Oh no, like what a loss. So for handout gear, for like a class situation, this is probably the best use for this. So anyways, that's the Krydex plate carrier and accessory setup. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope you got something out of this. Secret scene. Yes, if you stayed to the end. This is like a Marvel movie. Woo. I will say one thing at the end here, as an addendum to the whole thing, as kind of a word to like Krydex as a whole. And that is, if you're gonna just blatantly rip people's stuff off, like you're allowed to make improvements if you want to, since you're just stealing their entire design anyway. Why not go the extra mile? You know, uh, like for example, adding a back flap to this would have been a great improvement to make. I don't see why they couldn't have done that. It would have cost them a whole extra piece of corduroy, you know, or and then again too, I will say this is like the difference between this being actually acceptable for regular use and being kind of the way it is now is a couple lines of stitching here and there. It's like I find it amusing that certain things like the inserts and stuff are double stitched, but main line pieces of the carrier, like the cummerbund, are not, or the part that actually, the bag's actually being held together by a single piece of stitching. Like, my guys, come on. You went the extra mile on the small shit. Why not go like the extra mile on the major shit? And then actually you're, holy shit, you're now turning out a product that's actually acceptable. So yeah, it's that close. It's literally that close. A couple lines of stitching. It could be better. And if you're going to rip some of these designs off, why not make it better? Anyways.